Welcome back to Spectre Comics. I'm Mike. Today's speed draw topic is going to be K2SO, the Imperial Security Droid reprogrammed to serve the Rebel Alliance from the movie Star Wars Rogue One. I'm drawing on a Wacom Cintiq 13HD drawing tablet, and I'm using Photoshop Elements 2019 to draw this drawing. We're going to start out by doing a quick sketch of the pose, a quick underlay sketch. We're going to do a hardline layer. Then we're going to color K2 in and then add some shadows and highlights and finalize the drawing with a nice iconic backdrop. Once I finish the drawing, I'm going to post it on my Instagram at SpaceMissAdventures, so go ahead and follow me there to see this and other artwork by me. If you like the video, I'll invite you to hit the thumbs up button, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and in the comments section below, let me know who your favorite Star Wars droid is. Again, as I said, K2SO is a reprogrammed Imperial security droid that serves the Rebel Alliance, works alongside Cassian Andor. Rogue One, probably the only Star Wars movie that I liked since Disney took over the Star Wars brand. And to kind of go back on that note, let's talk about Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. I had high hopes when Disney took over. I was excited to get more Star Wars content. I grew up in the 70s and 80s when Star Wars was brand new. I remember going to the drive-in theater to watch Star Wars, sitting with my sister on the roof of my parents' T-top Oldsmobile with that crackly speaker hanging off the driver's side window. And there was no high-def video or computer graphics special effects or even surround sound at the drive-in theater. Again, I loved Star Wars since I was a little kid. I think it was 4 or 5 when I was at that drive-in back then. Loved Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Star Wars figures were prominent in my house as a kid. Loved buying the toys. Anything Star Wars I wanted to have. And then as I kind of grew up, Star Wars kind of faded. After Return of the Jedi went away, there was not a lot of content. I know they started doing the expanded universe, which kind of filled in the lore and the history of Star Wars, which was, which I liked, but I never was really a big rabid fan of it. I'm glad it existed. I did read a couple of the books and played the video games and enjoyed Star Wars most of my life. But again, as I grew up, kind of faded. There wasn't a lot of Star Wars content out there for me to absorb. And then when I was in college in the 90s, it was exciting because we were going to get a re-release of the original trilogy special edition. So I was excited Star Wars was coming back to the theaters. I was excited to see some new scenes and some new graphics that kind of fixed up some of the lesser parts of Star Wars that didn't really look real good because the effects did not match the vision of George Lucas at the time. And I'm not even saying, computer graphics in the late 90s were not the best. They were still kind of figuring it out after the Jurassic Park movie kind of introduced us to computer graphics. At least that's what I remember. And Star Wars was, it was just exciting to have it back. I started reading, I started buying books. I bought The Essential Guide to Characters to kind of fill in the gaps of all the expanded universe information I didn't know, but I was just really excited to get back into Star Wars. And then I was anticipating the prequel trilogy once the special editions were released and out in theaters. So all of this was kind of an exciting time because Star Wars was coming back. Now, again, I don't love the prequel trilogies, but I don't hate them either. Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, good, decent movies. Not better than the original, but still okay. And I was glad to see George Lucas directing again and bringing us new stories. I feel he got a lot of hate back in the day, but he had a vision, and it was pretty good. And we got to see a lot of the backstory. I remember when I was a kid hearing about how there was 9 episodes in the original storyline of the Star Wars, and we were just getting the middle portion. And I don't know how much of that was true. I mean, there obviously were not the prequels written already. Episode 1, 2, and 3 were not written already, but I think the ideas were there as just kind of notes in a notebook in George Lucas's house on his desk somewhere. But he didn't have full scripts written in storylines. Obviously, he's thought about it. He's kind of had ideas in his head, and then finally he had to go ahead and put pen to paper and bring us the prequel trilogy. And then Disney took over, and I was excited again that we were going to get more Star Wars content, Star Wars movies, new Star Wars video games, everything. Everything was kind of coming back out. I was excited for The Force Awakens. I went to the movies. I saw it. I liked it. It was okay. Felt kind of like a rehash of Star Wars. There was not a lot of original story beats in the movie. After The Last Jedi came out, it became very apparent that they did not think through the entire storyline. It was like you had J.J. Abrams set up the story beats and storylines for Force Awakens, and then Rian Johnson came in, and instead of carrying the storylines through, he said, the hell with that stuff. I'm going to kill off the villain and make my new characters. And I just thought it was a mess. I hated it. I agree with Geeks and Gamers and Nerdrotic and the Fandom Menace and World Class BSers and Mike Zero, all those guys, all those channels that say what Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams did and Kathleen Kennedy did to Star Wars was unpleasant, to say the least. So, I actually prefer to not even acknowledge that the sequel trilogy exists. I do own Force Awakens, but that was the last of the numbered trilogies that I'm going to buy. I do not like Last Jedi at all. And it felt like The Rise of Skywalker was 1,000 ideas thrown together to try to make a story. I resisted a long time going to see it. I actually wish I didn't go to see it in the theaters. I was one of the it had been out months before I saw it. But since I got Disney Plus, I could have saved the money and just watched it at home. But I will never watch The Last Jedi again. I will never watch Rise of Skywalker again. Those movies were just really awful movies. And not just bad. I mean, I can deal with a bad movie. I like a lot of bad movies. Many people like a lot of bad movies. But it's what these two movies, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, did to all of the stories before it. Darth Vader died to destroy the Emperor and save Luke. Now you bring the Emperor back as the villain. And Darth Vader, or Anakin Skywalker's sacrifice and redemption to save Luke, was then completely wiped out by the fact that they brought the Emperor back. And that entire sacrifice, that entire storyline, which was ultimately important to the whole history of the Skywalker saga, was completely wiped out and made irrelevant. Now, I know why they did it. They needed a villain after Rian Johnson unceremoniously destroyed Supreme Leader Snoke. I was more interested in who Snoke was and where he came from. That would have been a better story to tell. Instead, he just got destroyed and we never found out who he was. And then the ridiculous idea of Princess Leia, General Leia, Admiral Leia, whatever she is now, being blasted out of the ship in The Last Jedi, and then Mary Poppinsing her way back into the ship. Carrie Fisher unfortunately died right after that movie. They could have used that opportunity where she was blasted into space to let her go at that point and not bring her back. But instead, they kill off Han Solo, which I accepted at the time, but looking back, I wish they didn't do that. They kill Luke off in The Last Jedi, which they shouldn't have done. And then they let Princess Leia, General Leia, live when she was gone and she couldn't even do her parts for the third movie. So they made some poor choices and it was just a mess, real mess. But one of the bright spots was Rogue One. I did enjoy that movie a lot and I enjoyed the characters. I loved how it tied right into A New Hope. Literally you can watch those two movies back to back, and as one movie ends, the next movie starts, and I really liked that. When they start bringing back beats from the original trilogy, I really enjoy that kind of tie-in as a fan from the beginning. And also I want to point out The Mandalorian, very good as well, because it felt like they were taking beats from the original trilogy and the original stories and content and characters. And even though there was a bunch of new characters in the show, it felt like Star Wars. It felt recognizable, and it really was fan service for me, and I enjoyed it greatly. I'm very highly anticipating Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which comes out this fall. Can't wait. So getting back to the actual drawing, I'm working on the Imperial logo here. As we discussed earlier, K2SO is a reprogrammed Imperial security droid working for the Rebel Alliance, but he still wears the logo, allows him to blend right in with the Imperials if he was to kind of go incognito, working for the Alliance. Just finishing up the last of the hard line work, and we're going to start coloring this in now. So I'm just kind of selecting a gray. I'm using the polygonal marquee to block out areas for the main shell color of his metal shell. Large group areas using the paint bucket to fill in, and then I am erasing areas where there'll be either color or there'll be metal highlights. Filling in the logo here with white, I just reversed the color when I drew the logo and placed it on his arm. And just filling in all of most of the shell. He doesn't have a lot of variety of color here, so it's pretty easy to just kind of fill in large groups of coloring, and then adding the yellow at the shoulder area. And then I'm added this big round circle in the background as the backdrop. We're going to turn this into just a Death Star kind of icon, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now I'm adding some highlights to K2SO's head, and we'll add it all around his body, because even though he is got this kind of charcoal color, he does have shiny metal outer shell. So we're going to add the highlights. I'll actually dim this a little later after I get the highlights all placed. And we're just kind of working our way around with the paintbrush. And I'm using the paintbrush to get a little more of a gradient on where I'm adding the highlights. And I'm still adding a couple extra lines in here. Forgot to add a couple of things and clean some other lines up. But again, very little color on here. So mostly it's just going to be shadows, highlights, and a couple of pops of color like the yellow and the blue lights around his body. As I'm going around here cleaning up some of the line work, I wanted to talk about how I do my shadows and highlights. So as we're putting some highlights on the outer shell of the robot here, I just blanket some white in areas where there's going to be shimmer, areas where the light's going to hit, and I do that with the paintbrush. And then I will go ahead and apply the eraser. I actually use the eraser tool with the brush setting, and I go as fuzzy of a brush as I can get, and then I use a large diameter brush to kind of shave away at the highlight. The nice thing about what that does is it creates an automatic gradient when you erase with the fuzzy eraser brush. Now we're just creating a couple of lines and then the dish on the Death Star to give that iconic look in the background. Since he is an Imperial droid, I picked that as a backdrop. Thought that would look nice, and it was a pretty simple backdrop to throw him on, so I didn't have to draw anything major. This drawing was time consuming as it was. So that's just a nice, and I also will use the marquee tool to kind of block out areas if I just want to work in an area but I don't want to erase something that's already completed. Using the marquee tool to isolate where you're erasing is a helpful tool. So as we're coming in the final stretch of the drawing, doing the final touch-ups for shadows and highlights on K2SO, the drawing turned out pretty well. I think I have to go back and do a couple of little touch-ups to the shadows and highlights. Some of them look a little blobby to me, but we'll go ahead and fix that off camera here. Overall, I think the drawing turned out well. I like the character, and I like the iconic Death Star in the background. I might actually throw it in a star field as well and remove the white. But overall, pretty good drawing. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Let me know in the comments not only who your favorite droid is, but who you would like to see in a speed draw. I was thinking of doing The Mandalorian next. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.